السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. قال الله تعالى في شأن حبيبي: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه على سيدنا مولانا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعلى آله وصحبه دائما أبدا. صلاة وسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Ramadan Mubarak. Today is the 4th of Ramadan, and according to some, the 5th of Ramadan, which we may get into or not. But we started talking about fasting and Ramadan last week, and we'll continue with that this week and the next few weeks, a couple of weeks, inshallah. As I mentioned last week, there are only 6 verses in the Quran that deal with Ramadan directly, which is unusual for all of the arkan or the pillars of Islam, because even Hajj is mentioned in various places. But Ramadan is very concise. But what's one thing that's very important to understand when we look at these verses is that they were not all revealed at the same time. And that, we'll get into a little later on, inshallah. And it'll be easier to understand why that is so significant here. And of course, the first verse which starts off, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. That, oh, you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you the same way that it was prescribed for those before you, that you may learn or attain taqwa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the order of fasting. He tells us how to fast, and then he tells us the purpose of fasting. And so we covered a little bit of this last week, and there are points of this that we'll come back to, inshallah. In the next 2 verses, which you have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ayyaman ma'dudat, that it's fast, the fasting is prescribed for a fixed number of days. And then he says that فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. That, but if any of you is ill or on a journey, the prescribed number of days should be made up later. وعلى الذين يطيقون فدية طعام مسكين فمن تطوع خيرا فهو خير له وأن تصوموا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. And for those who can do it, then for every fast that they don't keep, then they feed either a ransom or feeding the indigent. But he that gives more of his own free will, it is better for him. And then in the end of this verse he says, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And that it is better for you to fast if you only knew. So even if you're ill or you're traveling, the indication is it's still better for you to fast. And one point here, and this will be repeated again, or one point to understand, the illness here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about is not simply, I got a headache, or, I stumped my toe, or something else. The illness is something where if you fast, it will be detrimental to your health. That is the illness in which you are allowed not to fast. And the traveling also is not, like we make qasr or shorten our salat in travel. It's not just the regular travel. It's not like, I'm going to drive three hours down South Georgia and then come back. That doesn't fit this travel. In this travel, it's when if you are traveling and your suhoor time comes while you are traveling, then for those people, they don't have to fast. But again, they have to make it up later on. But the reward of Ramadan is the reward of Ramadan. And that cannot be duplicated outside of Ramadan. And this is, again, part of why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes that it would be better for you if you fasted. Because, a lot of people, they'll say, I'm sick, so I can't fast. Well, what are you doing when you're sick? Laying around, not doing anything, not eating, not drinking. Well, you could have fasted. And then I hear this a lot, people, I'm diabetic, so I can't fast. Which is very interesting because pretty much 100% of type 2 diabetics would benefit from fasting. And then you have a very small percentage of type 1s that truly can't fast. They could adjust their medications and fast. The insulin, how they take it, when they take it, that could all be adjusted and they could still fast. So the diabetes excuse also, from a medical standpoint, does not fit. Again, like I said, there are a very small percentage of diabetics who, they should not fast. But not the general diabetic. And now the next verse, verse 185. Ramadan الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here now is giving us the virtues of Ramadan. Other than it is the month in which we fast, it is the time that we're supposed to fast. He said Ramadan is the month in which was sent down the Quran as a guide to mankind. هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. Also a clear guidance and judgment. Furqan is a criterion to choose between what is right and what is wrong. And that is what the Quran is, or one of the aspects of the Quran. It draws that line in the sand as to which side are you on. And so this is the month in which the Quran was revealed. And so there are several explanations for this, because people think, the Quran came down piece by piece. The beginning of the revelation, when Rasulullah is on Jabal Nur, in Ghar Hira, is in Ramadan. And there is a dispute as to exactly which date it was when the revelation begins. But everybody agrees that it's Ramadan. The other aspect of this is that Ramadan is the month in which the Quran is taken from Lawh Mahfuz and brought down to the lower heavens to begin its journey, through revelation to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is also Ramadan. But there's an aspect of this that we'll get back to, inshallah. فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر ولتكملوا العدة ولتكبروا الله على ما هداكم ولعلكم تشكرون. So now, after giving us some of the virtues of Ramadan itself, he says, so every one of you who is present during this month should spend it in fasting. But if anyone is ill or on a journey, the prescribed period by days later. Allah intends every facility or ease for you. He does not want to put you through difficulties. He wants you to complete the prescribed period and to glorify Him in that He has guided you, and perchance you shall be grateful. وَلَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. We'll get back to this in a minute, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reiterates the statement in the previous verse where He says that, if you're ill or on a journey, again, you're allowed to forgo the fast, but you still have to make it up later. However, if your illness is such, people have chronic illnesses or they can't fast legitimately, then for them, because they won't be able to fast later either. So now the ransoming of someone or the feeding of the needy. So one question that some people ask is, why does he reiterate this? He mentioned the same thing in the previous verse, and now he says it again. The Quran is not like any other book. The Quran is also not like any other previously revealed book. Even though all of the books are that were revealed to the prophets, to the messengers, are kalamullah, they are the word of Allah. And the Quran is kalamullah, it is the word of Allah. But it is distinct from the previous words. And simply the fact that it was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam separates it from all the other words, all the other books that were revealed. And these are important points to know, because again, this is the month of the Quran. So we should know the Quran. And as the verse said, the Quran is our guide. It is guidance for mankind. The ones who will truly benefit from it, as he mentions in Surah Baqarah, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, guidance for those who have taqwa. Of course, he mentions right at the beginning that the purpose of fasting is to attain taqwa. But all of mankind benefits it from the Quran indirectly or directly, because of everything that exists. I mean, if I look at the modern world, if I look at, the advancement of mankind, they all come back to the Quran. They all come back to those who understood the Quran. I mean, even the Renaissance period of Europe, before that you have the Dark Ages, what the Europeans refer to as the Dark Ages, which truly were the Dark Ages. How did they get out of the Dark Ages? How did the Renaissance come about? If you look at it, all the scholars were doing were simply translating works from Muslim scholars from Arabic into their own languages and then putting their names on it. If you look at medieval Europe, when the Renaissance is beginning, you weren't truly considered educated unless you knew Arabic. Because those are the guys that were translating these books, written by Muslim scholars, again, into their own languages, but in European fashion, putting their own names on it. So all of mankind benefits from the Quran. But he also tells us the Quran is that criterion to make your choice. Which side do you want to be on? So, but even the revelation of the Quran is different from other books. So within the Quran you have the law of abrogation, which did not exist in previous books. And the reason it could not exist in previous books is because all of the previous books were sent down all at once. And this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Furqan. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفْرُوا لَوْلَا نُزِّلَ عَلَيْهِ الْقُرْآنُ جُمْلَةً وَاحِدَةً. The disbelievers, they ask you, or the disbelievers, they say, why isn't this Quran revealed all at once? Jumlatan wahida, one all together, one word. Why isn't revealed? Why are they asking this? And these are who is asking this? The kuffar of Quraysh in Mecca. Why are they asking this? Because they were on good terms. The mushrikeen of Mecca were on very good terms with the Jews of Yathrib, which would eventually become Medina Munawwara. And so when they talk to them, they say, oh, we have this man, he says he's a prophet, and he receives revelation. And so this revelation that's coming to him is coming down piece by piece. So the Jews are the ones who told them, ask him this, or say this to him. Because all the other books came down all at once. What is this with him? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the response to that. كَذَلِكَ لِنُثَبِّتَ بِهِ فُعَادَكَ وَرَتَّلْنَا الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we're doing this for the satisfaction of your heart. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because for the beloved, all the rules can change. For the beloved, the lover is willing to change all of the rules. So the rule is that heavenly books are revealed all at once. But this is a conversation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is having a conversation with his Habib, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Habib doesn't want the conversation to end, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, fine, we changed the rule. Now it's going to come down piece by piece over the course of 23 years. It's interesting, the mushrikeen had a very good relationship with the Jews of Yathrib, just like today. If you look at the mushrikeen of today, they have very good relations with certain people. Time doesn't change. People in general, overall, don't change. Individuals change, or can redirect themselves. But if you look at human psychology as a whole, it's pretty much stays intact. So because it's being sent down piece by piece, you also have what's known as the rule of abrogation, which is mentioned in Surah Baqarah. مَا نَنْسَخْ مِنْ آيَةٍ أَوْ نُنْسِهَا نَأْتِ بِخَيْرٍ مِنْهَا أَوْ مِثْلَهَا أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we do not, withdraw or replace a verse other than we change it, exchange it with something equal or better than it. And do you not know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has authority over all things? Technically, the first law that was abrogated is the Qibla. Because before the Qibla was Masjid al-Aqsa. And of course now we know the Qibla is Masjid al-Haram, the Kaaba. So this was the first technical abrogation. And that applies to us. Practically, the first abrogation is simply the way the Quran itself is revealed. But even if we look at the Qibla being changed, if you read the verse in Surah Baqarah, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا. Again, for the pleasure of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Where Allah says that we see your vision roaming in the heavens, and soon we will change you to the Qibla that pleases you. Again, the pleasure of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But coming back to this point of abrogation, when you see something where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reiterates something in the Quran, whether it's a verse or a concept or whatever, that's an indication that it is not going to be abrogated. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is re-emphasizing it. Just like the re-emphasis of if you're ill or traveling, then you can make up the days later. So this is not something that somebody can come to you, oh no, that rule was abrogated, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reiterated it. And the rules of abrogation are important to understand as well. When Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, and when he becomes a Khalifa and he sent Imam Hassan and Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu to Kufa, because Kufa at that time was the center of learning, because Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu had been there. And Ali wants to shift the capital out of Medina Munawwara because of all of the turmoil that's going on. And he doesn't want that turmoil to affect the city of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he sends them in Kufa, because again you had this knowledge, you also had fake knowledge. When you have an opportunity for people to open their mouths, everybody starts. Social media is prime example of this. And so in Kufa, on every corner you had somebody saying something. In every masjid, you had people, whether they knew anything or not, saying things. So when Imam Hassan and Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anhuma, when they arrive in Kufa, one of the first things they start doing is they start, telling people, you can't speak, you can't speak. And they pretty much, limit who has the authority to say things, and only those who have authority are the people of knowledge. When Ali arrives, there were still some of these stragglers left behind. So he entered one masjid and this guy is talking. And so Ali starts asking him about the law of abrogation. And he can't answer the questions. He literally takes him by the ear and throws him out of the masjid. He says, you're going to misguide the people. One important point to note is when we're talking about abrogation, no law, or no verse that talks directly about the virtues of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is abrogated. Because there are people today who will take the verse, which is in Surah Nisa, the two verses in Surah Nisa. One is where وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَّسُولٍ إِلَّا يُطَاعَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفِرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفِرُوا لَهُمُ الرَّسُولَ لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. That we have not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says more or less, that we have not sent a messenger except that they should be obeyed or followed. And if any of them, when they had wronged their own nafs, had come to you and asked for Allah's forgiveness, and the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam had asked for their forgiveness, then and only then would they find Allah forgiving and merciful. So there are a lot of people these days who say, oh no, this was only for them. So after him, the law becomes abrogated, astaghfirullah. Which tells you that they don't know what they're saying. And if they do know what they're saying, they're lying and misguiding the people. There's again no verse in honor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has ever been abrogated and will ever be abrogated. And the next verse as well, but I don't have time, so I'm not going to go into that verse. And it's not connected directly to what we're talking about. Verse 185 of Surah Al-Baqarah, we're again starting with Shahr Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of that verse, he says what? He says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, that you may be thankful. Which is a very important concept to understand. Because if you read Surah Araf, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is having a conversation with Shaitan, when he's getting kicked out for not prostrating to Adam alayhi salam. As he's being kicked out, he says what? ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُم مِّن بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. That I will come to them from their front, and from their back, and from their right, and from their left. And then he says, and you will find most of them, وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. You will find that most of them are not grateful. He doesn't say that you will find most of them ungrateful. And this is an important point to note here. He says you will find most of them not grateful. Or rather, most of them will not be grateful. There's a such thing as being ungrateful. But there's also something in between, which is indifferent. Shaitan's goal isn't to make us ungrateful. He succeeds even if he makes us indifferent. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects not being grateful with kufr. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرُكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. Remember me, I will remember you. Be grateful to me, and do not disbelieve, or do not do kufr. If you look at that connection, ungratefulness is kufr. Not being grateful is kufr. And so part of the purpose of fasting is the main purpose of fasting, of course, is to attain taqwa. Part of taqwa is to be grateful to Allah. Time's up. I'm going to stop here. Brother will give the first adhan. And then we'll continue, inshallah, from here next week. And get more into the abrogation, because the way we fast now is not the way that the previous nations fasted. And that abrogation comes in the following verses. And again, that's why it's important to note that these verses were not revealed all together. And of course, with time change, Dhuhr time, which is Jummah time, doesn't start at 1:45. It starts a few minutes later. So that's why we'll do the first adhan now for the next few weeks until it shifts. And when it shifts back, then we'll do the adhan before the talk and then go from there, inshallah. Just a quick note, the history of the first adhan of Jummah did not exist during the time of Rasulullah, did not exist during the time of Abu Bakr, and did not exist during the time of Umar. This started during the time of Uthman. Only the adhan for the imam was during the previous times. This was added during the time of Uthman. Uthman added it because the people started getting lazy and coming late. And so he added the first adhan when time starts so that people will come. And then they will be there when the adhan for the imam is given to start the khutbah. So that's just the history of that. This is not bid'ah, or rather it is bid'ah, but it's bid'ah hasana. And none of the companions, including Sayyidina Ali, who is the master of fiqh, who is amongst the companions the most knowledgeable in fiqh, objected to it, and during his khilafah this continued on as well. So inshallah, you give the first adhan, then we make sunnah, and then khutbah, inshallah.
very long.